Welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Shively, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I'm on a 1 million pound mission. Now, I've personally lost over 100 pounds, and I've applied what I've learned from my own transformation journey to help my hometown clients lose over 35,000 pounds in just 5 years. Now I'm on a mission to produce over 1 million pounds of results by delivering my best weekly tips, motivation, inspirational stories, and transformation strategies so that you can gain clarity about what you need to do to reach your goals and give you the confidence to take action. And the perfect time to start taking action is right now. So let's do this.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 174, Beat Your Sugar Addiction with Sherry Strong. Now, as many of us know, sugar is a huge danger zone for so many of us out there, and sometimes it develops into a full-blown addiction, which is always scary, and it doesn't help that we all just running into sugary temptations on a daily basis. So we're seeing sugar at work, parties, home, the kids, grandma brings over some treats that she made just special for you. We are surrounded by sugar. So this is an important topic to wrap our heads around. And today my guest is Sherry Strong, and she's going to give us the tools that we need to make sure that we can win the battle against sugar. Now, having been a full-on sugar addict and twice her present size, Sherry now inspires people to trade the white stuff for the right stuff so that they can live their best life. And Sherry helps people to get sugar-free naturally by doing the inner work that allows them to shift into healthy eating behaviors. Now, before we dive into a little bit of a preview of the episode, I want to give our sponsor of the week a quick shout out, theultrahuman.net. They have some great products. They have 3 core products in their line right now. Today I want to tell you about Tao, T-A-O. It's a nootropic, some say, and it's a cognitive enhancer. So if you are somebody that's been in kind of I do a lot of coffee camp, you're drinking 3 or 4 cups of coffee a day, let's start cutting back on that and try this nootropic instead, and you're going to really notice the difference. There's a little bit of caffeine in it, but the other elements in there really help you to focus more. It helps with social anxiety and things like that. You may have noticed that some of my interviews that I've been doing, I usually hit one of these right before the interview when somebody interviews me, and I've been going like rage mode, Adam, full on energy, and people are noticing a difference. Like, wow, man, that energy was at a new level with that last interview. And sometimes I talk a little bit fast because of the caffeine. So anyway, check them out at theultrahuman.net. You can enter in the promo code MPM10. That's MPM as in Million Pound Mission, MPM10 at theultrahuman.net. That will save you 10%. And let me know if you try out the Tao and see what you think. Now, in this conversation with Sherry Strong, great name, by the way, Sherry Strong. I think that's a real name, too. I don't think that's like a celebrity chef name, although she is a celebrity chef. But regardless, she's awesome. And we dive into this conversation. We talk about the story of how Sherry realized that she was addicted to sugar. We talk about the steps that she took to reclaim control over her addiction. We talk about the question, like I asked her, are all sugars bad? What about things like fruit? Because I know those sorts of questions will pop up from you guys. So I asked her that. We talk about it. We talk about how sugar addiction compares to things like drug addiction. Super interesting. And the essential first step that someone needs to take in order to start to win that battle against sugar addiction. All right, so we give you that action step. Now, bonus content, bonus teaser here. For anybody that is a fan of Game of Thrones, I want you to look Sherry up on social media because it was distracting. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and she looks just like Daenerys Targaryen. Like she is the Khaleesi, the mother of dragons. She's got the flowing silver hair and everything. So it was so hard for me to not bring it up. She even mentioned Game of Thrones, and I avoided bringing it up because I knew it would go down a whole other rabbit hole that would take up the whole podcast interview time. So, but check her out anyway. And she's got a great social media page. She's got a great website. Dive into her info. It's really, really good. And she does look like Daenerys Targaryen. Comment when I post this on Instagram. Just comment like Mother of Dragons or something like that underneath the post if you agree. So that'll be our secret little code that you agree. Regardless, without further ado, you're going to love this episode. It's episode number 174, Beat Your Sugar Addiction with Sherry Strong. All right, Sherry, welcome to the Million Pound Mission podcast. How are you doing today, my friend?
It's such a joy to be here with you, Adam. Thank you for the invite.
I'm really excited because when I heard your story, I was like, this is someone that can help my audience, like specifically. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that'd be an interesting conversation, which I'm sure this will be. But with you, I was like, that person can help for sure. So I hunted you down. I wrote you some notes. I'm like, we got to get together. We got to do this. So I thought an interesting way to kick things off would be to tell us the story of how you first realized that you were actually addicted to sugar.
Well, look, I've been addicted from birth. So I often will start off and say I was born an addict, and I don't remember a time before I was probably 27, 28, maybe even 29, where I didn't have sugar.
Wow.
Yeah, every day. So I didn't even realize I was addicted until I was 14, diagnosed with hypoglycemia and depression, to the point of having suicidal thoughts, that they realized, oh, there's some issues here. So they took me to a psychiatrist. They diagnosed me with hypoglycemia, which is just a reaction from the body from having too much sugar. It's not some kind of disease you can't do anything about. Big misnomer about many diseases. But I had this severe depression. And anytime I have too much sugar in my system, that's the first place my body goes to. But probably at my worst, I was twice my size, not 10'4". I haven't had a massive height reduction. I'm sure some of your listeners can relate to that. And I remember one day rolling over in bed, like I rolled over and then my stomach followed. And I was like, there's something not quite right about that. That's not how it's meant to be. And I sat up in bed and I felt this heaviness of my body, like just this heaviness. And I thought, I wasn't religious at the time, but I thought God gave me the most amazing body, like not more amazing than anyone else. We've got this amazing body and I'm trashing it. And, that was the vanity piece, but the worst piece was that, and what I believe is sugar is the thief of joy, the lethal recipe, which I describe how sugar's made and many other foods, is the thief of joy. And I felt such a sadness and depression that every day I was on sugar, I knew I was losing my life. It didn't matter how long I lived if I was living like this.
Wow, that's intense. So you use the word addiction, and I know that that's a strong word. So how how does somebody know that, or how would you define a sugar addict for somebody that just because it's almost thrown around. Like people joke, like I've had clients in the gym, they're like, I had too much chocolate, I'm addicted to sugar, ha ha ha. But when does it become an actual okay, I am addicted to sugar, this is serious? How do we analyze that and learn okay, I've stepped across that line to the true addictive state? What does that look like? How do you define that?
Well, the thing is there's all kinds of addiction, and there's low-level addiction, and there's people who it's actually just a physiological habitual addiction. It's just that's what I do, and I've developed these deep neural pathways because when I do this, I eat this, and I eat this, and this is just how I do life. And then there are people who are like me, who were starting off the morning with half a liter of ice cream, eating a chocolate cake during the day, eating 3 meals a day, having cups of coffee with sugar in it, drinking 3 gin and tonics before dinner, having a half a bottle to a bottle of wine with dinner, and then eating dessert and going to bed, basically with a belly that was so full it hurt, and waking up in a sugar coma and just feeling dreadful, sleeping for 10 hours and not being able to wake up. So there's that on the spectrum. I refer to freebasing cookies, I was thinking about eating the next time. So that's food addiction and sugar addiction. So I was using food, and namely sugar was my drug of choice, to suppress feelings of discomfort and not being able to deal with emotional issues that were unresolved from childhood and were evident in my marriage. So I was using sugar to do all of that. But sugar addiction can be much more subtle. Like you have high-functioning alcoholics. You can have high-functioning sugar addicts. And it's just basically every single meal or every single snack or drink they have has sugar in it. And they're the kind of people who often they're thin. There's no like outward kind of presentation that there's an issue with sugar, but they can be just as addicted as someone else, and they just can be working, off the excess fat. But I've had elite athletes, like NHL hockey players and Australian rules football players that I've been working with, who have sugar addiction, celebrities. So they're sitting on the front of a magazine looking hot and looking amazing, but inside their body is addicted to sugar. So you don't have to be overweight to be a sugar addict.
That's interesting. I think that's a key point too. It's the mental component of it, that can be affecting anybody. And, and like you said, we could be covering up emotional things or using it to self-medicate like you did. So what were some of the ways that you said, okay, now I'm going to start to correct this. I'm going to start taking control over the situation. How did you start to do that?
Yeah, well, for me, I was so far down the rabbit hole of sugar, of food addiction. I knew I couldn't diet. Every time I tried to diet, I got fatter. Like I just always gained weight. It was just that thought of deprivation was too much for me. So I started running. And, I was a big girl running, and I lived in Australia. So anyone who knows Australians, they're not afraid of insulting people. And I'd have, men hanging out of trucks saying, move your fat ass, like get off the road, you hopeless creature. And so, but I kept going. Like I would come home after my run and cry, but then I would just keep going, and I kept going because I couldn't control the food. But I knew if I moved my body that I would somehow find my way. It was just, you got to find a way. Some people can't move their body and they just have to pick one thing that they give up or do it. There's no one way. I think that's probably the myth and why people are so confused is they're looking for the one way. And what it is you have to find your way. There's tips and tools and strategies that you can use and pass, to find out. And I've, worked on it and developed a path that works for people, but you have to do the next logical step that works for you. So I started running. As I started to run, I started to feel better, right? Because I was, sedentariness is a depressant. And so I felt better, and every little bit of felt better, I started to make better food choices. And here's the other thing. Anytime I was out for a run, I wasn't eating.
That's true.
So, it's all these little things, but I lost the weight. So I went on to lose the weight. I held positions of influence like the Victorian Chair of Nutrition Australia, Melbourne President of Slow Food, and curator and co-founder of the World Wellness Project. Wrote a book called Return to Food, The Life-Changing Anti-Diet. Lost the weight. But I had a dirty little secret in that I still had this low level of sugar addiction. And I had a business consultant I was working with. He's actually a local businessman, very successful. I was doing some videos for their company. And he said, you know what, I think you should take on sugar. Just he said it out of the blue. And I remember my language in my head. I'm cleaning it up for your viewers, but I was like, there's no flipping way I'm ready to give up sugar. Like, I just remember thinking that, like, what are you, nuts?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until it was probably about 8 months later, my mom almost died. And she was in the hospital, heart and kidney failure. And it was because she'd taken an antibiotic, fluoroquinine, which is poisoning all kinds of people and crippling and killing people, because her immune system was so low, because she was eating sugar and she was using food as a way of making herself feel better while she was nursing her sister through the last stages of cancer. So I almost lost my mom, and my mom is like, because I couldn't have children, she's like my world, right? And it was kind of this jolt, like, okay, something's coming in my life. And when she was in the hospital, I saw a woman who was beside her who was thin, looked by all accounts from the outside healthy, but she was admitted into the hospital because she broke her leg during a diabetes-induced stroke.
Wow.
While she's in hospital, in the hospital bed, her family comes in with a big tray of Tim Hortons donuts. So for the Americans, that's Krispy Kreme donuts. Like 24 donuts sitting at the end of her bed for the duration of her stay. And the thinking is, well, she's diabetic, but she's got insulin, so she can handle this. And it was just one of those moments, gloves off, right? It was just this moment of clarity. And I wasn't ready to give up sugar, like totally. but I knew I had to do something, and I knew in doing something, I would get ready. So that's when I created the program called Sweet Freedom. And our goal is to help millions of people give up sugar, trade their white stuff for the right stuff.
Yeah. So I want to take one mini step backward. So the running was kind of the momentum initiator for you.
Yeah.
What did and you started losing weight. So
yeah.
What was the next thing that you did? Like, obviously you did some things to clean up your nutrition. So what did that look like? What did the fallout and that next step that happened after the running and the momentum started to happen to where you started losing weight? What were the next steps that you took through that?
Well, I'll just go back to kind of re-mention, because it is significant. When I was exercising, I wasn't, overdosing on sugar.
Right.
So what that did was, just because the sheer volume I was eating, I would have to eat all day. So if I was out running, I wasn't.
Okay.
And the less sugar you have, the less grip it has. And also I knew how to eat nutritiously. Like I was a chef, I had professional justification for overeating, but as a chef, I was a good chef. So I was using real food. So I did know that piece.
Okay.
So and I had to nourish myself to be able to start to run. I got up to running 20 kilometers.
Wow.
So yeah. So, I had to have some fuel in my body to do that. And then I think probably the bigger piece was sorting out the nutrition for me, because I knew that intellectually, was starting to deal with some of the emotional stuff. So that was the piece. And when I used to, when I'd lost the weight and I was working with clients and things like that, when I worked with them on the nutrition piece, they had this much kind of success. When I started to work with them with the philosophy piece, so I branded myself as a food philosopher, that was where they kind of got the thinking themselves. So they weren't relying on me to say, eat this, don't eat that. They now understood, based on understanding the hierarchy of how we're meant to eat in nature. Oh, okay, so I can figure this out myself. So there was that kind of success. And then when I got them into the kitchen preparing their own food, they had this kind of success. And then the fourth kind of piece that's most significant is when I got them into this concept of what I call hypernourishment. That was like, boom, that's when things started to change. And hypernourishment really is sorting out what mentally, emotionally, and spiritually is toxic in your life. So, and how you're malnourishing yourself in those areas. And then starting to nourish yourself in those mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And then taking care of that in the physical just becomes so much easier, because you're not dragged down with negative thoughts, negative emotions, and our spirit isn't being crushed. And so our body's naturally seeking well-being. We're always wanting to feel better. And if we can deal with the mental, emotional, spiritual side, then it chooses to feel better by choosing higher resonant physical activities and foods.
That's interesting. My audience knows I'm big on the mental component, I call it strategic thinking. And so I'm interested in diving a little bit deeper on how, when people are coming to you and you're helping them now, how are you seeing that they are malnourished in those mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual components? And what are you seeing where people are how are we messing ourselves up, basically? That's what I need to know, Sherry.
Well, oh, you're so lovely. You got great energy. So I think here's the number one thing. Most of us are in trouble emotionally, spiritually, and mentally because we think our thoughts are true.
Yeah.
Most of our agony that we're experiencing in our life is because we've got some negative, spiels that are, scripts that are going over and over again.
We're telling ourselves.
The story, absolutely. It's the story. And most of our stories are inaccurate, or they're very, very limited. And so when we can get to help people to understand, you know what, that's a story, and you can actually rewrite your script. You can actually change how you interpret whatever happened or whoever that happened. And at the very least, if you've been traumatized and it's not your fault, you can actually heal that, and you can turn it around, and you can forgive people. And that piece of forgiveness is just massive for most of our healing.
That's so true. That's right in line with the way that I try to coach people about I love Tony Robbins, and I hear him say, change your story, change your state, change your life. And that's exactly what you described. So let's talk a little bit more about your process. You started to mention it earlier. I want to dive into that because I love to give my listeners that process, that action step. We always try to be, entertaining and high energy, but we need to put these things into action. So how can we put your process into action, Sherry?
Okay, so the first thing you need to have is awareness. You can't change a problem unless you're really aware of what you're dealing with. And so awareness comes in not just understanding how much sugar you're having, but where sugar is in everything, and also starting to become present and aware of how sugar is actually feeling in your body, because it's a drug. It's made like a drug. It looks like a drug, and it impacts the body like a drug. So as I'm sure you've heard this, and many of your listeners have heard it, sugar is made like we take opium sap and turn it into heroin, and coca leaves and turn it into cocaine. And in fact, it lights up the brain's dopamine receptors 8 times more than cocaine. So it's a drug. It is a drug. They've got brain scans to show it. There's no doubt about it. And the head of Amsterdam, the chief of health, says it's the most dangerous drug of our time because it's pervasive. It's in everything. It's everywhere. It's cheap. It's socially acceptable. It's hard to avoid. So that awareness piece of, oh my goodness, I had beef jerky in the United States. I bought it, and 33% of the serve was sugar. Like, I never in my wildest dreams, I thought. So people are choosing the animal protein because they think it's going to help them, not raise their blood sugar. And it's doing 2 things. It's blocking the receptors of the liver. Without the sugar, it blocks the receptors of the liver, so it makes it harder for you to metabolize sugar. And it's got sugar in it. So awareness of where sugar is, it's in everything. It's hard to find. So just that piece. And I get people to do visual reminders, like put sticky notes. And the important thing is you have to have a certain level of understanding and awareness, not just of the physical, but the mental and emotional and spiritual side of it. So you have to understand the triggers, what's actually causing you to have sugar. Like you start to observe your life. Oh, I notice whenever I have a conversation with so-and-so, like maybe it might be 2 or 3 hours later, I'm like woofing down the chips, right? Yeah. Which are turning into sugar in my body.
Right.
Or I watched, I binge watch Game of Thrones, and I'm literally mentally, emotionally traumatized. And so I'm eating things that makes me feel terrible. I used to say to people that I love Game of Thrones, but I hate violence. So I fast forward the violent bits so I can get through an episode in 6 minutes, right? Right?
Yeah, if you take out all the violence and naked people, there's like 2 minutes of that's all you got.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. So, so there's all kinds of awareness pieces that we go through to go, what is the trigger? What's the neural pathway that I've developed that has me eating sugar? And it's not just sugar. It's what I call the lethal recipe of refined sugars, refined grains, refined salts, refined oils, and refined chemicals. All of those things will contribute to sickness, imbalance, and this level of discomfort and disease in our bodies. Yeah. So awareness is the big piece. Then we have to understand how we're meant to eat as the human species. And this is where I can tell you I've taught nutritionists around the world. I've taught in universities. I've taught in institutions, nutritional institutions, and 90% of us are getting it wrong. And it's because we have too much information. It's conflicting information, and we're not going macro, and we're not using wisdom in our choices of understanding how we're meant to eat as the human species. Right. When you start to understand that the human species is meant to eat certain foods, it's not meant to eat certain foods for other animals. So what now is we're not only appropriating, we were given dominion over the animals, and so we decided to kill and eat them. It's like, I'm giving you dominion over my children to take care of them for the night. It's like that Far Side cartoon where there's the witch at the dinner at the door, and the parents are coming home for the night. And there's like, what? We hired you to babysit our children. And instead, you cooked and ate both of them. So, yeah. And not only that, we're going to torture these animals. We're going to feed them an unnatural diet. And remember, what you eat eats, you eat. Yeah. You eat what you eat eats. Okay. And then we're going to take all these processed foods and we're going to fill them through our bodies. So when we understand how nature or God, however you define it, evolution or God or nature has a path and a way that we're meant to be eating. When we understand that, we're not a victim of any marketer or any kind of someone who's just bamboozling us with the science, right? If you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, baffle them with your bullshit, right? And that's what a lot of nutritional marketers do. Yeah. And so people are eating this stuff and they're like, but I read the science. It's so convincing. And they're not actually sitting back and listening to their body that's actually saying, this actually feels terrible in your body, okay? your body's incredibly intelligent to tell you what it is you're meant to be eating. So understanding how we're meant to eat as the human species, and then nourishing us, that piece of hyper-nourishment. So getting out the toxicity mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, putting in nourishment in those areas, and then getting into community, a supportive community, which you're actually creating, where people are like-minded. Yep. Because if you have different, oh, I'm doing paleo, I'm doing vegan, I'm doing, oh, this is right, this is wrong, like you're just going to have the chatter is going to drive you crazy. And at some point you're going to be overwhelmed, or you'll give up. You'll lose the weight, but then you'll give up and it'll come back. So you need community, and it has to be ongoing, supportive. Any addiction program will tell you can't do it alone long term. And the last step is begin before you're ready. So don't wait until you're ready. Like start. Stephen Pressfield, talks about resistance. Anytime we want to accomplish something important or a huge, meaningful endeavor in our life, we're going to experience resistance. The ego is going to try and hold us back. And we just have to start anyway. So when I started my Sweet Freedom program, I wasn't ready to give up sugar. But I knew in the process of creating it, I would actually get ready.
Yeah, that last point is key. I've been hammering my audience I talk about our goals and our why behind that goal, but lately I've been talking about the why now behind your why. So you can get fired up, like, I want to lose weight because I want to walk my daughter down the aisle, and that's my why, but why now? Why are you not going to wait until everything is perfect? Because waiting for perfect, that doesn't happen. The perfect time to start is now. So I think we're on the same page there. Absolutely.
And the other piece is once you walk her down the aisle, then what do? Right? So when I'm working with people, I get them to have an arsenal of whys. Right? We have our external whys that are based on our family, being around for our family. But can I tell you, when your husband triggers you, like really does some primal triggering, and your external whys, I want to look good in that bathing suit or the wedding dress or whatever, you're like scoffing down the chips and the ice cream, and you're going, I'll show him, I'll be fat, not, you know what I mean? Yeah. You have to have levels and layers of whys that are selfish, external, deep meaning, and long-term all combined. So it can't just be one, because triggering is we're so vulnerable.
Yeah. I'm in total agreement there. I talk a lot about, I'm not sure if you know who Dean Graziosi is, but I heard him on a podcast. Yeah. So he talks about 7 levels of why, and just keep asking why. And then why do you want that? Why? Until you get 7 levels deep. And it's something that gets you emotional. And that's what I tell my people. I'm like, if you're going to wake up, I had 40 people show up for my group fitness class at 5:30 a.m. this morning. And they had a strong enough why that when their alarm went off at probably 4 something, they got out of bed and showed up. So I'm like, that's what we need. When the alarm goes off, why do you not hit the snooze button? And that's what we need to develop, that level of a why. Now, speaking of our why, a lot of people's why is our children. And we want to be there for them. We want to, I know that my kids motivate me to the extreme to be as healthy as possible. So how are we setting up our children to develop sugar addiction? How are we, and a lot of us aren't meaning to do that, obviously.
That's correct. Yeah.
But we are nonetheless doing that. So what do we need to avoid? Let's talk about the kids a little bit.
Yeah. Great question, because a lot of people think that they can set up the household so there isn't sugar around it, but they can have their stash. But you know what? The kids know. The kids know energetically when you've had sugar in your body, because you're not sober, right? It alters your body chemistry to the point where you're not sober. So you actually have to live it. You have to model it and live it. And it has to come from a place of non-judgment and love. And you also have to understand that if you spent 10 years or 6 years or even 2 years conditioning your child, good behavior, treat, bad behavior, eat crappy, you know what I mean? Or you just got a child from birth that's being given baby formula and is not only, got their physiological predilection to liking sugar, but now they're entrenched. It's like they're an addict. You have to be prepared for a state of discomfort when you're taking the drug away. So, and that discomfort comes from the child. It comes from you. You're all now going through withdrawal. Yeah. Crazy family, right? Crazy town. So really important that, and we get people 4 weeks of nourishing themselves before we get them to give up sugar. Because the more you can actually nourish your family, nourish your body, you start to get ready, learning how to make that food taste great. Because if you're going to take the sugar out, and then I've seen some of these programs, I remember seeing, I think it was Food Inc. And there's this family, who were eating the fried food and, volumes of food and the processed food. And all of a sudden they're trying to make this healthy food. And I'm looking at it and they're putting like a big can of tomato sauce on some raw chicken breasts and boiling it. And I'm just like, and then some overcooked greens. And I'm like, that's like going from a kind of Disneyland resort, to, not a concentration, a refugee camp, It's like, oh, we're healthy. Isn't this fun? So you have to learn how to nourish yourself. You have to learn how to make it taste good and then start taking the sugar out. Just by nourishing yourself, you're going to start to find that you're having less sugar. Less sugar you have, the less of a hold it has on you. The more you're getting used to this other food, you're getting used to another. It's not a drug-like spike, but you get this kind of ground calm feeling of well-being because your body's now starting to get nourishment. It's starting to nourish your brain. Most people feel crappy on sugar because it's actually sucking nutrients out of their body, malnourishing their brain. That's why they're calling Alzheimer's and dementia type 3 diabetes, right? So sugar strips the nutrients from your body. So if you can start to put it in and you can start to get the family involved in actually food preparation, this is one of the hardest things. But all the healthiest cultures on the planet, the children are involved in the food preparation because it's one of the most essential life skills, right? It's like teaching your children financial responsibility, or relationship skills, teaching them how to feed themselves. And when I work with billionaires who can afford to have a team of chefs working for them. I get them in the kitchen preparing food, learning how to prepare food. And I remember I was working with one billionaire and I'm showing him how to make almond milk and I'm actually peeling the almonds. And, because they're anti-nutrients in the skins of almonds. And I looked over at him and I said, I know what you're thinking. And he's like, no, you don't know what I'm thinking. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, okay, what am I thinking? I said, there's no fucking way I'm ever going to peel almonds again. And he goes, okay, yeah, you know what I'm thinking. But you know what? He had a totally different relationship to almond milk once he made it himself because he realized the effort that was required from the planet and in making those almonds, the effort required by humans in peeling them almonds, the effort, there's a new relationship when you understand how food is made. And here's another thing. When you taste that almond milk versus anything you get in a pack, it's completely different, right? So the other one has like an almond waved over it, and it's got all these carrageenan and additives and that kind of thing, right? Whereas this has nourishment, and this little bit, his tasting had more than a whole container of almond milk has in it. Wow. So getting in the kitchen to prepare food changes your relationship with food. And if you're a parent, you are giving them an essential life skill that will do way more than anything they're going to learn in a physical school as far as, the reading, writing, and arithmetic.
I think that's an amazing way to approach it. I love the thought of just shifting focus. It's not we're taking this away. It's just we are focusing on this other area. I'm not taking that away from you. And like you said, once we start nourishing ourselves and fueling our body and our body starts to feel what feeling good actually feels like, then it's easier to wean off of the sugar. So once we are there and we have been nourishing, you say we do a 4-week focus on nourishment, then we start to, spend a little bit more of our energy on deleting the sugar. What does that look like?
So we, at 4 weeks in our 8-week program, we have people getting off of sugar. So we do a 30-day challenge. And I'm not saying that you're never going to have sugar again. I think it's, for many people, it's unrealistic. A lot of people can do it. That's no problem. But I want everyone to have a really good long stretch, 4 weeks of understanding what sobriety feels like, what it actually feels like to have a clean body. And there's a mental clarity. There's an emotional groundedness that happens when you're nourished and you're not having toxic influences in your body. So we get people working on that. And every single day they're given a video to, because every day you're going to have new challenges, right? As you go through that process to kind of get you going. But it's in the lead up, preparing you for that you then start to get excited. And then we start to get people focusing on flavors. Let's add some spice into your life, not just in the food, but what are some of the activities? You've got this, you've got clarity about your mission in life. Okay, how can we start to implement that? So you start to focus on those things that are deeper meaning things, because a lot of people are actually, addicted to food and substances and behaviors because they're disconnected from their purpose. They're not just disconnected from nature and a feeling good body, but they're disconnected for the reason they actually came to this planet, or the reason they're here, or the reason that makes them feel that being on this planet and their life was meaningful. Because most people, when they're dying, who've lived a really interesting life, like really full on life and lived their mission, they don't have this terrible fear of death. It's people who have never really lived. They've been pursuing, things that don't really matter, right? Accumulation, or status, all that kind of stuff. And they haven't used that accumulation or status to truly serve the world. They're the people who are like, I can't die now. I haven't come here to do what I meant to do. I've wasted a trip, right? It's like going up, walking all the way up to the hill on the snow hill with your toboggan, and then just crashing into a tree and wrecking your toboggan. It's like, did all this work,
Right.
So getting connected to that purpose and mission in life is really important for people in the process of giving up sugar, because now you've got something bigger than the drug you're addicted to.
Yeah, that's very wise. You're dropping many wisdom bombs here on us here today. So I know my audience is going to ask me the question, so I need to ask you this question.
Yeah.
How do we define sugar? So, like, are we talking about getting rid of fruit, or so what does what are the rules of the game that we're trying to play here? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so anything that's white. Okay. Anything that's white, that once was a different color in nature, that's white. So that includes white stevia. That includes xylitol. That includes anything, refined. Anything refined is out, because the refining process takes out any of nature's intelligence. It takes out all the nourishment, and it turns it into a drug. So we're getting off the drugs. Now, fruit is completely allowable, but here's the piece. Nature actually controls our fruit consumption, right? If you think about it, it controls the fruit consumption because it's seasonal. Yep. And it gives us a glut at the end of summer to last us through the winter, right? There's very few places in the world where you can bear fruit 365 days a year naturally. Like, man can override nature, but it doesn't mean it's natural, right? So here's, when people are saying, okay, I made my smoothie, and it's like they're literally got a liter of fruit in there, and it's sugar, and they're downing it, and they're like, I can't figure out why I'm not losing weight, Right. So I get people to think of a concept that I call the consumption concept, and it's tied to another philosophy I teach called nature's principle. So nature's principle is nature tells us what to eat and the quantities to eat it in by how easily it's obtained in nature and when it's obtained in nature. So that which is most abundant, we're meant to have most of. Air, highest, our most life-dependent nutrient, it's everywhere. Water, second most life-dependent nutrient, 70% of the planet, composite of your body, 70%. Then there's vegetation. Nature tells us there's a hierarchy in vegetation. We're meant to have more vegetables because there's more species of them. They're less seasonally dependent. Fruit, less species. If you have a broccoli seed and an apple seed and you're hungry, what do you plant? You plant the broccoli seed because you're going to have food within a few weeks. You plant the apple seed, you're waiting years before it bears fruit. And then, even if you have a fully grown, mature apple tree, it has to grow to maturity and then ripen before it's palatable. And it's in that ripening process, most of the nutrients are actually infused into the fruit. So here's the problem. Most of our fruit in the supermarket shelves is picked green. It's picked before the nutrient infusion happens, and then it's sitting in a warehouse sometimes for up to a year, and 18 months. They've had fruit that's in storage in 18 months, and it's atmosphere controlled. So then they put the ethylene gas into it, so it looks like it's ripe and the sweetness has developed, but the nutrients aren't in it. So have you ever had an apple and you're eating it and you're thinking, yeah, I'm doing this because it's healthy, but it's kind of just blah, right?
It tastes like nothing. Yeah, you're just chewing.
A little bit of sweetness, bit of fiber, but I'm doing it because I'm healthy, but it doesn't feel good. And it's because that fruit has not been ripened naturally. And it's your body's way of saying this is not nourishing, right? So understanding that nature has this incredibly intelligent way of communicating to us what it is we're meant to be eating. So that last thing is nature tells us what to eat and the quantities to eat and by how easily it's obtained in nature. So that which is most abundant, we're meant to have most of. Harder to obtain in nature, we're meant to have less of it. And nature gives us stronger physiological desires, so we work harder for it. That's why fruit's more appealing to us, because nature gives us stronger desires because we're going to work harder for it, right? And if you cannot get it in nature, not only do we not need it, it's harmful to the body and the planet. So that's where most of us are eating, from this area of things we could never make in nature. So the consumption concept goes, How much would you eat of it if you had to gather it yourself? So how many blueberries would you have in your smoothie every single day if you had to gather all of those blueberries and preserve them, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be having a cup every single day. So as we start to understand this piece about sugar and how nature naturally controls our sugar consumption, which is why there's no such thing as obesity in any tribe that's dependent on nature, any, culture. It only happens when our food sourcing is done by lots of other people that we can become obese. But sourcing our own food in nature, it's almost impossible to become obese.
That's so interesting. I first came along the concept of kind of seasonally eating fruit. I read one of my favorite books called Primal Body, Primal Mind. And that's where they start talking about fruit is seasonal for a reason. And so I started eating more fruit in the summer months and then less in the winter months and focusing more on vegetables. But it's super interesting how that works out and how, just like you said, nature has the map that we can follow. It's right there. Yeah. And it almost seems like technology and the evolution of our society, like we have all these advancements, but the people that are the healthiest are the ones that are living that primal lifestyle. So what are you doing? Are you growing your own food, or knowledge is power, but the more I learn, the more it freaks me out. I'm now I can't eat apples from the grocery store anymore. So how are you trying to kind of find that happy medium of living a modern lifestyle, but trying to apply some of these primal principles?
Yes. So number one, I always like to get people understanding how it really was, because there's a huge marketing machine that said, let's go paleo. We're going to eat meat 3 times a day, 7 days a week. Never happened. Paleo man never ate that way. He ate 11 to 15 species of plants to every animal species. And then he ate animal species in a hierarchy. So from insects to rodents to little birds, to fish, to then these bigger mammals that we're life dependent on, 7, days a week. That was not the regular food. And they only killed because they couldn't find the other stuff. So the stuff that really nourishes is the stuff that grows. That's, I remember teaching the consumption concept in Australia and talking about this hierarchy. And I said, if you had a choice between chicken or the egg, and you had to source it in nature, you choose the egg. When we're not sourcing it ourselves, we choose the chicken because the chicken's more addictive. Any species that has hormones and blood rushing through its body becomes addictive to another species. And if you had a choice between a chicken and a lamb, you choose the chicken. And this guy pipes up and he goes, I don't mind killing a lamb. And I was like, oh, back up, right? I was like, okay. He says, I'm 3rd generation lamb farmer. And anyone who's Australian would cringe at my Australian accent. But I was like,
I liked it. I thought it was good.
Thank you. He said, I don't mind killing lambs. And I was like, okay. I said, do you remember the first time you killed a lamb? And his whole physiology changed because he actually remembered it. And he slumped down in his chair, went from this cocky, Australian to literally slumped down in his chair, and his head went down like this. And I said, did you have to cut off a part of you that was human in order to do it? And he went, yeah, I did. Wow. So there's a lot of bravado around this primal eating and paleo eating. But the truth is that most people have got it wrong because they don't understand how primal man truly ate. It's the meat industry loves the paleo guys. So you're asking me about sourcing food and growing my own food. I am horticulturally retarded. If I had to depend on me growing my food, definitely starve. Okay. Yeah. So not my gift. I spend thousands of dollars. I still try. I've got stuff out in my garden now, but just not my gift.
Right.
So I go to farmers markets. That's the best way to find seasonal, local, organic, and whole. You still have to ask because not every farmers market sells organics, and a lot of them sell a lot of the crap stuff. But it's one of the best ways to actually find out what is seasonal, local, organic, and whole. And if you live in some kind of desert around, and there are food deserts around where it's just fast food places, you go to the best supermarket you can, and you can Google what's in season. You can start to ask your supermarket, I want some organic stuff, right? And I don't want this limp stuff that's been around for, 5 weeks and you're trying to sell it, right? Yeah. You can even grow herbs in your house, and even I can grow herbs, okay? So, and that green, it's nature. Every little bit, you just build on it, and then you just learn another recipe, and you go you get friends in the area. You have to have a community. You go to a co-op. I'll drive. When I used to live in the country, I would drive an hour to go to the farmer's market. Oh. You make that a priority. You make it an effort. And it becomes like I would drive to the mountains to get my spring water. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you something. Just 2 weeks ago, I went to the spring to gather my spring water. I have like 9 5-gallon containers. They cut off the spring. It's the second time it's happened here in Vancouver where the government or the corporations have shut off our access to a spring. I cried for 2 hours on the way home, Adam, because my identity is now connected to a sense of pride of going to get my spring water. But more importantly, it tastes so much different when you go and gather your own spring water from a real spring than even the stuff that I get from a company that delivers spring water. So you build on your success and you start to feel, and you're observant of how this new food feels in your body, and when you start to make it taste good, because that's, my gift as a chef, you're like, yeah, the other stuff, it just doesn't tempt me. It really doesn't. Like good ice cream will tempt me, but bad ice cream doesn't tempt me,
Right.
So, and then you start to look back at these things that you actually lived on, like started the morning with, lived on, ate.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the same appeal because now you're getting nourishment. It feels good. And there's a deeper meaning piece to this, because what's good for the body is good for the planet. And what's good for the planet is good for the body without exception. And right now, without getting too high on my soapbox, we are literally destroying the planet with how we're eating.
Yeah.
And so when you start to eat these meals and you know that you're having a very small footprint on the planet, I don't want you to get into the pious self-righteousness, but just really appreciate that we have so much to be grateful for on this planet.
Yeah.
And we've been gifted amazing access to food, like unprecedented in the history of man. So when you say it's too hard to cook dinner, right? Not you, but
Yeah.
It's never been easier to source and get good food. It might require a bit of extra effort, but it's very different than going out into the wilderness and sourcing all your own. That's hard.
Yeah.
Ordering it from, a supplier online or having to drive an hour, that's not hard work, really.
Right. This will fire you up, but I've mentioned a couple of times. Well, I had a client, the past 6 months I was working with, and it was a male, and his excuse for not being able to eat healthy, Sherry, was that his wife would not cook him the healthy foods.
Yeah.
I was like, hello. Yes, the 1960s have called and they'd like their mindset back. I just ripped him. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, this is
Good on you.
I mean, he's a leader in his company and like he's in charge of all these people. I'm like, you can't even man up and just cook your own food, like put something in a crock pot. And like, that's ridiculous. So I kind of hit him with the virtual frying pan over the head. Now he can cook his own food. Thank God. And but just mindsets like that they're scarily abundant right now. Like just that weak mindset of, oh, it's not the easiest thing ever, so I'm just not going to do it. But we're sacrificing our health. And then, I just had a stroke, or I just had, I've been diagnosed with diabetes, and then I'm going to get serious with it. And that's just that. We got to drop those mindsets, and you know it as well as I do. So, now we've had one heck of an interesting conversation, and I wish that we could go another 45 minutes, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I have to make sure that my audience knows how to connect with you, dive deeper. You've got great information out there. You've got a ton. I feel like we're kindred spirits because my audience knows that I love to develop a process. I love to name it so people can follow it and understand it and add clarity to understanding where they're at. And you do the same thing. So how can people follow you, connect with you, and continue to dive into your information?
So we have a website. It's Sweet Freedom, because that's what you get when you get off of sugar. You get Sweet Freedom. .ca, because I'm based in Canada and the .com wasn't available.
It's all good.
So, .ca. We have a 7-day Eat Less Sugar Challenge. It's free. So I used to charge $97 for it. It's just to eat less sugar because a lot of people are so addicted. They're just like, I can't give it up. But I can show you how to, number one, eat less. And then the sugar that you are having, have upgraded versions that aren't going to spike your blood sugar, drive you crazy, or deplete nutrients from your body, and show you how to nourish yourself in a way that tastes good. So if you can get to 7 days and do that, and most people get to like eating a quarter of an eighth of what they're eating, you're going to notice an increase in your well-being and power. And for those people who know that they need that, they're ready to give it up, we have an 8-week online program. And for your viewers, Adam, I'll give you the link. You can supply the link to your viewers so they'll get not only a special deal, but some gifts from me.
Great. That's awesome. Now, what about social media? Are you out there on like Instagram, Facebook? How do people find that social?
So there's Sweet Freedom Life on Instagram and Facebook. I also have on my YouTube channel, Sherry Strong, over 70 videos. On the recipe, sweetfreedom.ca, there's over 50 recipes. Sorry, the website, sweetfreedom.ca, there's over 50 recipes. And if you want to follow me, my personal kind of page, it's Food Philosopher, Sherry Strong.
Excellent.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Excellent. We'll get people plugged into you. Now, I always like to end our interviews putting people into motion, putting them into action. So let's say that somebody has listened in, and if they're still listening 45 minutes into it, they're plugged into this, and they're thinking, you know what, I think this is an issue that I need to start working on solving. What's the first step? Like what, or it doesn't, like you said, there's not one simple thing that fits everybody, but what is a possible simple first step that somebody could take just to start winning this battle?
Yeah. Well, the first step is to get quiet. We've got so much chatter, discursive stuff in our head, the crazies within the head, discursive mind. We've got so much stimulus externally. It stops us from getting quiet and really connecting to, our why and what this. So get quiet and start to become aware. And if you feel like it's beyond you, don't be afraid of asking for help. Like ask the universe, ask God, whatever it is you believe in. There's something out there that when we ask for help, we get it. It comes to us. We have obviously the 7-Day Eat Less Challenge. It's free. I know you have a ton of, resources. Just start to get the positive mental stimulus in that shows you the way, the path, and you can do it. And if I can leave people with something that's really important that we're starved of, like our biggest vitamin deficiency on the planet is vitamin L, vitamin love, right? And that kind of self-love piece. So connecting to the place that we all have the seeds of being able to love ourselves and to connect and love with one another. Because the number one cause, I write in my book, Return to Food, addiction is your body telling you you're not listening to your soul. But the number one cause of addiction is disconnection. So connect to something greater than you and connect to the people in your life. That social context in which we eat is as powerful as what we're eating. So I'd much rather have a greasy bowl of noodles with people who are kind, positive, loving, and upbuilding than have the most gourmet, nutritiously prepared meal with people who are angry, depressed, and negative. But imagine having something that's nourishing, energizing, protective, and it tastes good, and you really connect with people at the table. One, I can tell you're going to eat less. Even if it's nourishing food, you're going to eat less because this connection, like us talking, like how pumped and how full do you feel when you connect with people through your podcasts, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to do. It's amazing.
Exactly, right. So we can have those conversations at the table. And, happiness researcher Shauna Core has shown you can take someone who's physiologically, genetically predisposed to depression and pessimism. And by getting them to share 3 things that they're grateful for at the evening meal, you can turn them into a lifelong optimist.
Wow.
So we need to connect with one another. This is our best sugar, right? This is the best treat, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, Sherry, thank you so much for spending time. And like I said, I knew that you were going to deliver for my audience. I knew that this was a perfect fit. So I'm just so grateful that you just carved some time out of your schedule and you opened up and just openly shared your story. And I know it's not always the easiest thing to do. So I appreciate your energy. I appreciate that kindred spirit that we share. And I'm glad that we're on the same side of this battle. That makes me feel empowered to have people like you standing alongside me as we help as many people as possible. So I think that's an amazing thing.
My absolute pleasure, and kudos to you for what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's really beautiful.
All right, everybody. We have blasted away for the last 45 minutes, and now it's time for action, all right? You know that we are entertaining, we're high energy, but that means nothing if you don't implement and start to take action alongside some of these things. So what is your action step? I want you to consider something in the next 24 hours. Maybe it's signing up for Sherry's course. Maybe it is just being mindful, like she said, getting quiet and look inside, and let's address the situations that need to be addressed and then get in motion and start making progress. So that, my friends, that's how we get out there. That's how we own it every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, good looking. How's it going? Before I let you go, see, I used the big, deep Adam voice for that one. That's because I'm going to hit you up for a favor, my friends. I need some help getting the word out there. If this episode struck a chord with you, if it made a difference, if the podcast is getting you fired up and motivated, there are two things that would mean the world to me. They help out so much. Number one, if you could just share the episode out. I don't care if you text it to somebody or you share it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Share it out. Let someone else know this is a podcast. It's a little bit different and it's making a difference for you. The second thing, if you could leave me a review wherever you're listening to your podcast, preferably in iTunes. If you're listening in iTunes right now, you can click on my emblem and you should be able to leave a review for the podcast, and that would be huge as well. So that's why I was flirting with you at the beginning. All right, let's be real. I was using the deep, sexy Adam voice to tell you how good looking you are and how thankful I am that we are connected. I'll stop using it. It's using my power for evil and not good. So thank you so much for the support. It's been really overwhelming. We're going places, my friends. This podcast journey that we're on, we're really making a difference. The 1 million pound mission is where it's at. So thank you very much. I will see you next time.